again the requirements. So MedDev 221 articulates MedDev 271. So I don't know how many of you are versed with European directives and regulations, but they're really different than we do things in the U.S. And so very referential too. Not that the QSRs are not referential for FDA, but they're exceptionally referential, I find, EU. I think of all of these topics related to surrounding sort of the management of post-market data surveillance as a bunch of nested topics, okay? So, you know, a CER is just kind of starts with the clinical evaluation, moving into a clinical evaluation report, moving into the production of clinical data. And we'll get into more details about this, obviously. So a CER is simply the document of evaluating the clinical information and the formal evaluation, and including an assessment and analysis. And the focus, of course, is, because it's Europe, it's safety and performance, right? Think about your essential requirements. So, regulations are really driving the need. How many of you have heard about the change from the MDD to the MDR? It's a big shift, and it's in transition now. The MDR was ratified last year. It's in a transition period. I'll talk to you a little bit about that as we go. But it's changing a lot of things. It's affecting how you get your CE mark and what the requirements are, the essential requirements. It's affecting also the details. The MedDev, the guidelines are also being all affected. So there's guidelines that change independently on their own course, and then there's guidelines that are changing strictly in response to the regulatory changes. So we've had a transition to Rev 4, and Anne's going to be talking about that for the CER guideline, MedDev 271.3 to 4, and we're going to get into the details of that, but just know that there could be more changes coming. You know, this is never a fixed thing, so this is sort of where they're at right now. Okay, so CE marking, for those of you that are not as familiar with that process, it requires the permission of the CER with the technical file. The technical file is an entire topic. We could talk for hours about the technical file, but the CER is a component of that, so that's why it's a piece that you want to think about when you're talking about your obtaining your CE mark. So clinical evaluation and investigations, that's what Chapter 4 is about. And so I think in a manner that's kind of similar to the way FDA is structured. It's like, we assume that your device is risky and unsafe unless you can prove to us otherwise, right? That's the whole premise of the 510(k) process. It's also the premise of deciding what level of clinical evaluation and investigation you have to do, right? So there's also a new definition of clinical data, and that's an important one. So it now means information on the safety and performance generated from the use of the device. It's sourced from clinical evaluations, which are trials. And trials is strictly for higher-risk devices. I'll talk about this again on another slide, but that means Class 3 devices, especially for animals. It also means active Class 2B devices. And then another source could be a clinical investigation of equivalent devices reported in the scientific literature. Okay, and that is about equivalent devices, and you can also have scientific literature about your device or equivalent. And in addition to the scientific literature, there can be clinical experience. So think of that separate as studies and investigations that have been conducted on your equivalent devices or your device. So there's also clinically relevant post-market surveillance. Okay, and this is sort of, for me, the foundation of everything, because this is really what's changing across the globe, which is why the presentation was subtitled, you know, changing the post-market data. And especially even in that context is the PMCF. We're going to talk about that. Okay, so what are the elements that are connected to the CER element of of the changing mandates. So post-market surveillance plan is sort of the overarching plan that you have to have. And it's it really establishes all the timelines and the requirements, and it calls out many elements, and of course the post-market clinical follow-up, which is what the PMCF stands for. It drives the need for CERs. So that's where your need comes from. It is from that PMCF activity set. There's also periodic safety update reports, and they include PMCFs. Now, this is the term for sort of medium to low risk devices. If you have a class 3 device, there's a very different safety reporting mechanism. So we're not going to talk about that today. We're kind of going to focus here on sort of mid-level to lower risk devices. I think that's what most people are doing. If you're in the business of having a high risk class 3 device, you're already kind of operating in that space. You have a PMA in the US, and that's going to be a different presentation and a different topic. Periodic safety update reports, they do include the PMCF, and the CER requirement itself is specified in MedDev 271. You're going to hear more about that in depth. And it involves like looking at the overarching clinical strategy. I think for that P-SWOR, the short, people refer to this now as a P-SWOR. And it does involve looking at a company's sort of overall clinical strategy and the basis on which they're making the case that their device is, safe and performs as expected, right? Rather than safe and effective, right? So US is safe and effective, Europe is safety and performance. So a little bit of a different. That nuance is important because it affects how you do your documentation. So, when you're transitioning between EU appropriate documentation and US appropriate documentation, there's language and there's arguments you have to adjust to. So, the current MedDevs, actually it's not current anymore, we've moved before. So, we have transitions, but I think a lot of people think of clinical evaluation reports in the context of revision 3. And that's definitely changed. Those are, we can just say, sort of as a flat-out statement, those CERs are not sufficient. The requirements have changed dramatically. There's a lot more data required. There's a lot more substantiation required. There's a lot more effort required and review. And we're going to be sharing more of those details with you. But just please know that if you have established them for your company and submitted them to your notified body, under Rev 3, it's changing. All right. Why is this all happening? Why are they doing this to us? Well, device manufacturers have been grumbling for decades. I've certainly been one of the grumblers, and I know many who have been grumbling, that regulations around the world are not harmonized. That you have to jump through ridiculous numbers of hoops, and they're very different hoops for different markets. So the regulators have been attempting to kind of get together and talk about this. They've been actually talking about this for probably more than 10 years. 1992 was when they began the Global Harmonization Task Force, or GHTF. If any of you have used those, how many people have reviewed GHTF guidelines? Okay, a few people have. Those actually still exist. We'll get into this a little bit more. They do still exist, and they're quite valuable. They don't they never had the force of law because of guidelines, but they sort of had more impact and force than they do currently, and that's because we now have the IMDRF, which is not on the slide, we'll get there. So the Global Harmonization Task Force really was a voluntary convergence of regulatory requirements. It was also a convergence of regulators and industry leaders, and so one of the industry things that has changed is the new organization we're going to talk about, the IMDRF, is just regulators. And I've heard some cynical commentary that might be related to them wanting to sort of close ranks and push out industry, and I actually don't see it that way. I see it as they knew they really had to get things done, and to get things done, they had to negotiate with each other and force each other to make change. And so I think you should probably take a positive spin on that in their intention. And things are changing, and so the MDR is a result. We'll get the whole list of what's the result of those changes. But while it existed in full force, they produced 50 guidances And they're still valuable, and if there's a topic that covers what you're working on in your company, go read that DHTF guidance, because even if it is in the process of being superseded, it's still important, and it's a great landmark and a baseline to start from. So another reason I think that this is all changing, that we're having all this harmonization of regulation, is because product development is changing. You know, just as everything else is becoming globalized. Sorry. Product development has changed dramatically. I think this is very true for the U.S. market, where we've had so much supplier outsourcing and contract manufacturing outsourcing, and in fact companies popping up globally that may have a U.S. headquarters or moves from the U.S. to another country and all this stuff. All this globalization is really driving this need to harmonize the regulations and get everybody more on the same page. And the other issue, of course, is emerging technologies. Technology is changing rapidly. You know, the regulators have experts working for them too. You know, and the more they can meet with each other and share resources and share planning and strategy, the better that globally they're going to be able to address all these new technologies that are happening at such a fast rate. But with anything that you ask for and wish for, watch what you wish for, because this is what's happening. So here's a bit about the IMDRF. It's ground zero for harmonized change, I like to call it. So currently the members of the IMDRF are Australia, Brazil, Canada, China, the EU, Japan, and the US. Okay? And this is an important list to remember, because we're going to get to another topic called MDSAP, and it's a subset of these. And MDSAP is an offspring of the IMDRF. But these guys are talking, and they've been talking for a while. You know, they have a structure, and the chair and secretariat of the organization are rotating annually. I think Australia was first, and Brazil second. I can't remember now. Anyway, these are associated bodies that are considered affiliate organizations, and this is important for the Asian markets especially. So again, they're replacing the long-standing GHTF they're adapting, consolidating those guidelines, and they're promoting interagency cooperation. They're moving towards harmonizing actual regulations instead of just providing the guidance. And here are the results, folks. ISO 1345-2016 is a result of this effort. The MDSAP program, which we'll talk about a little bit more. The Universal Device Identification databases that are happening in the US and Europe, and coming to all the countries near you soon, major market countries, I'd say. And the medical device regulation and the in vitro device regulation for Europe. So, consequently, the requirements for notified bodies have tightened a lot. So, let's see. I think there used to be something on the order of 157 notified bodies around the globe for medical devices. And as part of this transitioning process of all those elements we just discussed, the decision was made, cut it to zero, everybody requalified. So there's also an auditing standard. Did I cover that in here? There's an auditing standard that's come out. Well, it's existed, it's been revised. And it's basically, the long and short of it is the notified bodies now have to qualify themselves through an evaluation process very similar to the audits that they conduct, but probably much more rigorous. And they have to qualify all the individuals to work with them. They have to begin showing evidence of their ability to do rigorous audits. And so consequently, I'm not sure, somebody in this room probably knows the number. We're somewhere around 50, I think now, of pre-qualified notified bodies in total. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And then to perform other specific types of audits, that number just shrinks and shrinks. So when I say 50, I'm thinking 1345, 2016. So this is the context, and we'll get a little bit more into the notified body topic in a moment. But in fact, for the CER topic, why is the notified body important for the CERs? Well, they're transitioning their review criteria as well, you know, from Rev 3 to Rev 4. Wow, okay. Can you still hear me? Well, maybe if I do that.
You and the guy next door.
Wow, that's exciting. Is it raining? All right. So, one handy little thing that I'm not sure we covered in the other presentation, but you know, NetDev provides a CER checklist. It's Annex 10. And it's for a manufacturer, but the notified body also has to follow it. So as the notified body is reviewing your CERs, they're having to use the same checklist that you are, and they're having to show evidence that they have reviewed your CERs in accordance with that checklist. So that's an example of the kind of heightened scrutiny that they're under. They evaluate your CER through the assessment report, and that report is Annex 12, if you ever want to go find an example. So anyway, back to notified bodies. We talked about the restructuring, we talked about the rigorousness, and the IMDRF. These are the areas in which they're having to be qualified. Okay, so this is the specifics, and we're going to have our slides available if you want them. You can ask them for them. But these are the criteria, and this is related. There it is. That's that standard. That's that auditing standard. 17021. Read it. I can't remember the number of it. So this is where it gets really interesting because we're going to talk about MDSAP in a second. And the MDSAP audit capability for notified bodies, I think, might be at 6 notified bodies are currently qualified. I know it's less than 10. Not very much. And there's some really important reasons why that's important. So back to the MDR. Thank you, Steve. This transition from MDD to MDR happened in full force in 2017. It was ratified. There's a transition period that's happening. Basically, new products. For new products, you have to be fully compliant with the MDR by 2020, and the IVDR by 2022. If you have previously marketed product, and of course there should be like 6 asterisks next to that number, right? Previously marketed products, all kinds of qualification and what that means, but you have until 2024 to transition your products. And for IVDR, it's 2025. And even that one has another asterisk because there's some document somewhere that said that may change from 2025 to a later date. And so this is Europe we're talking about after all. And this is in relation to what's going to be required, what is now required under the CER. So focus on more post-market surveillance, requirement for expert panels. And this is, I'm talking about this in the context of the CER, but this is really for device approvals into the market overall as well. So there's a correlation, and Anne's going to do a better job of teasing that apart for you and giving you the distinction between seeking market approval versus maintaining your CER. But these are the kind of changes that are really impacting both. So there's this expert panel, and it's kind of like an advisory committee with FDA, right? You're familiar with those. You have them for each category of product here in the U.S. It's required for Class 2B actives and Class 3 implantable devices. You don't have to go seeking it unless you have a product in that category. However, once you do seek an opinion, you have to consider it. So does the notified body, not just the manufacturer. The notified body and the manufacturer have to consider the opinion of that expert panel, right? And you might not like their opinion. Right? Once you have it, you have to incorporate it. Okay. So ISO 13485, 2016, hopefully most people, anyone in this room not familiar with what this standard is? Excellent. I took a auditor certification course in this a few years back, and the guy teaching us, he described it as death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's really appropriate. Because no one change in the standard is going to shake the world per se or shut down your company or anything. But the accumulation of all the changes that are happening is a dramatic impact on your quality system and how you run your processes. Okay. So one of the big ones for me that they just sort of slipped it in there is this little requirement that it actually states that you must comply with all relevant regulations and standards for any market into which you sell or within which you produce. Okay? That's a lot. There used to be a lot of skating room, kind of like, they had harmonized standards, they had, voluntary standards, and you could sort of navigate sort of those notified body inspections, knowing that, there's a little room in there. The wiggle room is gone. Just know that. The wiggle room is gone. And also, so here's kind of the translation, is that, notified body auditors can look for EU compliance elements during a recertification audit. So even if you're getting a notified body audit, maybe certain products aren't in Europe yet, or you haven't even gone to the European market yet, but you're going, and you've stated that you're going, they have the right to look for the required elements for that market when you get a 1345 audit. Okay. And let's see here. So, bringing this back to the CER topic, okay, what does this mean in terms of CERs, and why did I include this slide? Well, when you're formulating your post-market surveillance plan, 1345 applies to all devices in the market, right? So, if you're in Europe, the post-market surveillance plan on your products has to cover everything required from Europe, plus every other market you're in, right? So it's going to become this unified way of reporting and these unified elements. So what that means for your quality system is that if you're designing these pieces, you don't want to have 3 different procedures to deal with post-market surveillance, right? You want to have a unified approach. So that's one of those examples of a giant shift and a giant change, is that you have to now be writing the procedures for your quality system. You provide the data for not only Europe, but the US, for Australia, for Brazil, wherever you're selling, China. Okay, and don't forget China. Ignore that bit about every single relevant regulation. Some of those Chinese regulations are really different. Some are not, but some are really different, right? Okay, so when you're doing your plan, your post-market surveillance plan for a device, you have to know that ISO 1345 expects you to have a proactive program, right? And the express conclusion of the PMCS study. So really quickly, here's MediSAP, the Medical License Audit Program. So again, this is coming out of IMDRF, right, that we talked about earlier, but only a subset has actually signed up to do it. Basically, Europe is weeded out. That's the way I look at it. They have official observer status along with the WHO. So World Health Organization and Europe are official observers. The participating nations, there you go: Australia, Brazil, Canada, Japan, and the US. And this is the big deal, is that it is mandatory for Canada for 2019. If you want to sell your product into Canada, you have to have an MDSAP audit by 2019. Wait a minute, how many notified bodies are qualified to do an MDSAP audit, did I say? Oh yeah, 6, roughly? If you're not signed up already, you're kind of in trouble already. So will there be more getting qualified? Yes, but the process is very rigorous. And so here's the thing about MDSAP really quickly. This is an entire topic, of course. I could do a presentation for a couple hours on it, but it can be conducted by the notified body or by a competent authority. So the US FDA can conduct it, the Australian TGA can conduct it, for example. It doesn't have to be your notified body. Any of them, they have qualified auditors to do the audit. So there are other options besides your notified body if you want to sell in Canada in 2019. Okay, just got that. It is a more stringent criteria than 1345, and that's part of the qualification challenge. Okay, role of risk assessment. Can't really overemphasize the role of risk assessment. It's affecting everything these days. It's just constantly increasing. Every medical device manufacturer, regardless of market, is required to evaluate the risks and benefits of the product and have a risk management file to analyze and mitigate, as far as possible, that's a change in the language, the risks for that product. The risk analysis is a crucial element for the PMCF. It's also affecting, obviously, the resulting CER. So a deeper emphasis on risk management and risk analysis in the changes to the CER requirements. And they're also, manufacturers have to evaluate risks in their own quality management system, identify processes and process risks that put product quality and therefore safety at risk. That's another one of those 1345 changes I was talking about. The emphasis of not just product risk management, but process risk management, and that's a big shift. And of course, everything around post-market clinical follow-up is considered high risk. Okay, so when you're talking about your quality system, I mean, you really do have to think about inputs and outputs. Come on. So, think about your quality system as a series of inputs and outputs. Everything has an input to it. Every process in your quality system has an input, and then it's going to have an output to something else. So they're all interconnected, right? Why is this important for CERs? Because you have to have a process within which you create your CERs. They're not just standalone documents that you can go do some great project effort and create one and then you're done. You know, this has to be maintainable in a state of compliance, and that involves a lot of elements. So they have to integrate with each other. Let's see, and this of course includes the post-market data, such as complaint handling, product CAPAs, and digital supporting. Those are really key elements that you have to have those processes connected up to your post-market surveillance program, and of course your PMCF, and as well, it has a major role in how you handle and develop your CERs. So what are the system inputs into the CER? So a comprehensive literature search strategy, including criteria for acceptance and rejection. Some examples might be PRISM charts, consort review, other things. More details to come, right? Establishment of a risk-based review cycle. What do they mean by a risk-based review cycle? It means that you have to justify the frequency with which you do these evaluations and reporting, right? So the higher risk of your device, the higher the frequency, right? So can you get away with only reviewing every 2 years? Maybe. You have to be able to justify that, okay? And you have to have a strategy for obtaining competitor and predicate data based on equivalency criteria. And what is that criteria? It's clinical, technical, and biological. And this is more than substantial equivalence. You know, I think in the U.S. we think about substantial equivalence, and we do sort of evaluation of competitor devices to determine your predicates if you don't have one yourself. That's a little bit different. This is more in detail, and there's a lot of fur flying around about this requirement because it's difficult, because people have patent protection, people have IP. How do you get competitor data? And there's a lot of information out there on this. I'm not going to get into that. Someone should do a presentation here, Joe, on this topic. I'm still here. This would be a great topic. I think people would be interested in, but it's just going to get hotter. And you also have to have a data management tool for retention and review of the collected clinical data and documents. Because as you can imagine, as you're collecting more and more of this and you want to maintain its accessibility, wow, we went from cold to hot, huh? You want to be able to repeat that process, right? And therefore you have to think about how you're going to manage this data. You have to think about how you're going to select a tool to do this. I want to caution something that I tell all my clients is don't buy the tool before you know your requirements. Start running your process, get used to the new requirements, think about what you're trying to accomplish, create some basic requirements that you need from that tool before you run out there and buy a tool. I've lost count of the number of companies I've run across where, regulatory or clinical or somebody or quality is hollering for some automation, right? Finally, upper management relents. They say, okay, here's some money, but shut up and go buy yourself a system, and we want it in 90 days. Right? What do you think happens? They run out and they buy. The first thing they can is like, oh my God, we have to spend that money, or the year's going to end, we're not going to have any money. So they buy a tool, and then they try to force their system into the constraints of that tool. That's one of the worst things you can do, because you end up creating new non-compliance, right? You end up creating, data headaches and other things. That's a whole presentation by itself. I'm sure somebody's going to give it. Anyway, it's really important that you think about these elements in that context. So just remember also that you do need expertise these days under Rev 4 to do the CER process. So you have to think about who you're using as your device statistician. You hire an expert, you have somebody in-house that you can support your qualification as an expert. You don't have to hire a PhD biostatistician, but you have to have somebody either in-house who's qualified or get somebody to help you who is qualified, right? You have to have a clinician. What does that mean? What do you mean by clinician? Well, that's been a little vague and it's getting clearer. And are you going to talk about clinical qualifications? Maybe we'll take that as a question at the end. But basically, it's someone with clinical credentials. It does not have to be a physician. It could be a nurse. It could also be other allied healthcare providers that are qualified. So there's lists out there, and you can look up what that qualification looks like. One of the interesting things I've noticed is there's currently no certification that I'm aware of for these clinical people who you might latch onto and find to help you, especially if they're not inside your company already, right? What do they need to know? What is their qualification beyond being clinically knowledgeable to help you with your product and evaluating the CER, right? So that's kind of a gap right now in my mind. You also you need to have input from your chief product designer or chief product engineer. You also need input from marketing, sales, and service. And also, you do need to get input from your usability and human factors engineering team. That's another requirement. That's becoming a global thing. I had that in the list because there's this experience that comes out of that realm that's really relevant. Okay. Okay, system inputs to the CER. Again, this is sort of page 2. I've done that one. Okay. Where are we? So you have to have a comprehensive literature. Where am I? Oh, okay. There we go. All right. So what are the outputs of CER? Is this just this thing, you go put it in a package and send it to your notified body and you're done with it? No, not really. It has impact on other parts of your quality system and on your product planning and on your product itself. That's where you should be deriving your intended use or updating your intended use. The clinical performance and benefits. So these are citations from the MDD. I actually don't have the citations from the MDR in here. She has them. Okay, so but remember, right at the moment, if you're doing CER updates right now, you are still under. You can go forward to the MDR. You can choose to, but this is a regulatory strategy decision, right? You can also choose to meet the MDD at the moment. If you're putting a lot of money and effort into doing CERs right now and then transitioning to Road 4, it's probably not a very wise strategy to spend much time and money meeting those, but you can. You can for now. And that's an advice question I would definitely be asking Anne later on. Okay, so you also have to think about risk avoidance. You have to think about usability for the intended users and what they mean by that. So professionals, lay persons. Someone was just giving a presentation, I think it was John, on 510K process and talking about home use devices. Okay, well, those were lay users, right? And disabled persons, okay? So big emphasis on disabilities now, and that's becoming global as well. Okay, and what's the suitability of your information material? Okay, that's your IFU and your labeling, right? For your intended use. Post-market data. Another topic. Near and dear to my heart. This has become global, right? The nuance of who wants what when is varied according to market, but everybody cares about it, everybody wants it, everybody wants to see it. It's the underpinning for the UDI requirements in the U.S. within regulation, the UDI regulation, right? And it's a requirement to expediently identify, not the UDI, but the post-market data, it's a requirement to expediently identify device design or usage problems and to accurately characterize real-world device behavior and clinical outcomes. They want you to know more about your device, they want to know more about your device, and they want you to know more about each other's devices. Inputs and outputs go into the risk management process, right? So you have to take that data and consider it in your risk management process, not just yours, your competitor data, and you also have to have your risk management have outputs based on that into your product design. The product and technology is new. The manufacturing or marketplace has limited understanding of patient population and complexities of the disease state. That's a higher bar than if you have a well-characterized sustaining product and you have available data for state-of-the-art market experience for similar products, right? So how well characterized is your product? Has it been on the market for a while? Do you have a good grip on that data? If not, then you're going to end up in that category of new product, right? So new product or technology, you have to have more increased monitoring to ensure early detection. If you're well characterized, you can rely on your awareness of state of the art And support that, of course, it's wonderful, that'd be great. And that's a lower bar, that's a lower threshold. Okay. So, just so thanks to BSI, I like some of their graphics. I think they do a good job with them. This is just sort of a nested example of how this all sort of fits together. So, clinical evidence picture, you think of it as sort of the superset. Within that, you have clinical evaluation, and within that, you have the actual clinical data. This is kind of an eye chart. I apologize. It's pretty easy to find this under BSI. You can also just take our slides. I'm not going to get into that too much because this is a topic that Anne's going to talk about much more extensively. But that's sort of just the picture of it. Okay. So let's talk for just a second about the global PMCF. MedDev 212-2 Rev 2 reflects an emphasis on long-term clinical data, and it underscores the importance of detailed documentation that is required for post-market clinical studies as a part of an appropriate PMCF plan. Okay. The guidance provides guidelines and support for the creation of risk-based PMS plans. Relevant to your clinical data plans. Analysis and final reporting has to be in line with 14971, factor risk management. It defines novel medical technology. You have to define, these elements, and if you meet these categories, again, the requirements are heightened. So the whole point of this list is that it's heightened requirements once you hit those. A novel technology, a high-risk product, high-risk anatomical location, high-risk target populations. Can somebody do something about this heat? Do they have someone on this? I'm assuming everyone's getting distracted. Please go ahead and take off your jackets and things. Okay, and it comes down to this, right? The verification of safety and performance when exposed to larger and varied populations of poison users. So this is, post-market clinical follow-up planning is about all these things you can't predict, right? When you go to market with a product that's newer or it's a new technology, you can't predict what's going to really happen in the population. That's the underpinning of the topic. Okay, so I just want to touch on this. This is not in the scope, but I hear a lot of confusion out there about post-market. So the new MDR in Europe takes a step forward in improving access to European vigilance information and market surveillance, both, right? So post-market surveillance and post-market vigilance are two different things. I like to think of post-market vigilance as the reporting piece, right? Event reporting. Think of it like the MDR process in the U.S. because currently you cannot see those reports for Europe, right? We have the MAUD database for the U.S. You can go any day of the week. You can go open the MAUD database and search the medical device reports that have been reported on different products. If you know the manufacturer name, or if you know the product code, or even you can type in search terms, you can get a lot of data out of the FDA database. Europe doesn't have that yet. Okay, this is a huge deficit, and they're trying to catch up. Remember global harmonization? Remember IMDRF? That's an area where they're trying to catch up. So one of the things you'll find, though, that's challenging is I call that really dirty data. So you go into the MAUD database, and sure there's all these device reports. People can type stuff in, whether it's a consumer or a provider, or whether it's come out of the complaints database at a company. It's freehand text. People type whatever they want. So you get these spellings, you get long terms, it is ugly data, people. I'm actually have hired people to come help me clean up data. Thanks. And it's ugly. So that's part of the point of the UDI process, right? UDI is to help standardize devices, to give them a coded system that you can get. So when you're talking about a product, instead of trying to describe the brand name of the product, you can punch in the UDI number, right? And of course, that UDI database has a lot of details about that product. So over time, this is going to make a big difference. Okay. So Europe has adopted that UDI process as well, and it's going to get us down to this topic, UNIMED. The UNIMED is the database that's evolving for Europe, and I think that's Article 33 defines that. And it has all it covers all these elements. So this is an example of how referential the European regulation is, right? So Article 33 speaks to Article 29, it speaks to 57, 92, 100, and 73. So this is where they're going to be collecting it. Let's see, what's the timeline for this? Let's see, going back to my previous slide. I think, by the way, it does use the GMDN universal codes, and its specs are expected in May of this year. We'll see how that goes. And it's expected to go live in March of 2020. So again, there's asterisks when they publish the dates, right? Okay, so that's it for me on this topic. I just want to say that, you know, sitting here and taking this lecture, if this is the first time you're doing clinical evaluation reports, or if you don't have an in-house expert that's been doing them, that's kept up with the regulations, you know, attending a couple seminars is not going to get you there. It's complicated stuff. And so please reach out for help. There's people here attending the conference that can help you. Maybe you have other resources. But reach out for help and get your help sooner than later. Don't wait till the last minute to bring in some people to help you get this together. Because it is complicated. There's all these inputs and outputs. There's a lot of regulatory elements affecting things. So just take that into consideration. Okay? We're ready for some questions.
Question here.
Go ahead.
So I'm getting the feeling that there's a lot of emphasis on post-market, which is still considered phase 4 for clinical trials. Does that mean that it's because they're trying to push it to a market and then still evaluate its activity?
So basically, we had a question about why is there such an emphasis on post-market data, and how does that intersect with clinical trials? Is that right? Okay. So I think, interestingly enough, when you're talking about clinical trials, there's this existing requirement for post-market data, and they want you to look at, you know, demographics and expanded populations. That's a little different. So that's a case where you're talking about a higher risk device, because only high risk devices require clinical trials at this point. That's changing in Europe, I know, but it's changing according to the criteria I sort of started to outline a little bit, and maybe, you know, Anne's going to touch on that topic a little bit, not in terms of talking about clinical trials, but in terms of how you keep yourself out of having to have them as you're talking about your clinical evaluations.
And I think it's good to realize that we don't really have this phase 1, 2, 4 trials for medical devices in Europe, at least.
Right. Don't you follow ICH guidelines?
In Europe, it's more common to follow the ISO standards, so the ISO 14155. So there you don't have the differentiation.
So that was going to be my second question. Doesn't that make it difficult then to do clinical trials somewhere else? Say in the US or Canada, there's a particular population that's of interest. You conduct the trial there or device does.
So clinical trials is like an entire topic, and yes is the answer, and no is the answer, and it depends is the other answer. So I would say, you know, what we're talking about is sort of exclusive of devices that require clinical trials. That's, you know, clinical trials is its own entire topic, and the requirements for clinical trials are changing as well. This is more for moderate to low risk devices. You know, I think once you have a high risk device on the market, you have to meet these requirements and others, right? So there's a superset of requirements, not a superset, a subset of requirements that are in addition to what we've been describing. Okay, and they definitely exist for high-risk devices. This is sort of aimed again at that sort of mid-level of risk to low-risk devices.
And if you're talking about the MEDEF 2.71 revision 4, they do point this topic a bit. They say at a certain point, like, can you use data from your device outside Europe? If you have all these safety events and you have all this performance data and claims evaluated, if you bring that together, is the benefit risk profile acceptable? And if not, how are you going to deal with that? And if yes, why do you think so? So that's the process of going through this evaluation process, conduct. Do you have any questions on this part?
So for human data, is ISO 14155 why? Let's say you're accumulating human data in the United States and you have really good clinical practices. Is that the whole thing you're 14155?
I think it is. The MEDEF does not state it has to be performed according to the ISO 14155. it does say, well, you have to evaluate whether it's acceptable data and why you think it's a good study or why it's not, what are the gaps. And then they say, for example, if it's conducted according to the 14155, it should be acceptable. But they don't say that they don't accept the other data. The other way around, the FDA actually published a new regulation or a law, I don't know exactly how you call it here, that the FDA now accepts for its data according to the ISO 14155.
Oh,
So if you did perform your studies in Europe, the FDA is willing to accept it.
there are subtle differences
Yeah,
between the two. There's subtle.
yeah, but it is saying now, well, if it's performed according to the ethical conduct, then they do think it's valuable. Of course, there are still population differences as a critic you have to bear in mind.
Do you include review articles?
I
Journals, you know.
sometimes do, and I sometimes don't. I would not include review articles for my device data. So you have two searches that you perform, and if I'm purely talking about the device, I would prefer to write a review myself because I should have all these single articles already identified myself. If I'm writing a state-of-the-art review, sometimes there are no systematic reviews or meta-analysis, and randomized controlled trials not always make sense to write a broader context of state-of-the-art. So then I sometimes do say that I will include the reviews. But I will mention, I think it's good to mention that already in the literature review protocol that you will include them and the reason why you think that's acceptable for this case. Yeah. It's difficult to write though, based on a review.
So in general, exclude.
In general, I would say excluded, yes.
But there are published
Oh, yeah.
reviews. Actual
Yeah, they are published. But the problem is often if it's not systematic or if it's not a meta-analysis, you don't know what data they left out, whether there's any bias in that sense. And that's why you do the systematic search. So it kind of, you do the systematic search and then you use data that might not have been searched that systematically. So that's iffy. Any other questions in this part? Then I will move to the next. I'm not sure whether this is me. Yeah, it should be me.
I understand we've gone from one extreme to the other.
Yeah, just like this.
I have a challenge with scarf. Does anyone? I'll see what I can do again. Who likes metaphors? Is it just me? I love these things.
So I don't go into too many details about the contents because it works different for every device and every person who conducts the evaluation. But this is the content that our reports normally look like. So we of course have the front page, intro pages, etc. And then we have like 8 main chapters: introduction, current knowledge, state-of-the-art, device description, equivalent devices, if applicable, the clinical evaluation itself, the conclusions, and then your references and your appendices. What I want to say about the first part is don't forget to add a version number and a date because it's required per MEDEF. Make sure that it's signed by all the evaluators because that's required per MEDEF as well. What else can I say? The document references, again, note not only that you use the IFU, but also note which version you use. And then for the next ones, I will go through them one by one. So in the introduction, well, the introduction is used to set the stage. So make clear that you're writing a clinical evaluation report. Make sure that you write out for which device you're writing the report, for which indication, because as we noted before, it's not that straightforward as it seems to be. Note what guidelines have been used. The notified body will be looking for that revision 4, so make sure you mention it. Outline what kind of clinical data is used. Also, if you don't have any studies performed by yourself as manufacturer, it will be good to outline that already and say why you didn't, or why you use a literature-only approach, for example. You can refer to your you should refer to your clinical evaluation plan if you didn't implement it as part of your report, and otherwise you can implement it here. Then is current knowledge and state of the art. So you did your search, Now you have to make sure that you write your review. It will depend a bit on your device and the amount of data that's available, how that state-of-the-art section will look like. As I just mentioned, if there is a lot of systematic reviews available, it's easier to write a review. If there is not that much, because it's a very specific indication and it's in an area where just not much is published, you may want to write summaries of the articles that you found and evaluate them and then bring them together. Refer here to your literature review protocol and to your literature review report because it shows the third evaluator, the notified body reviewer, what methodology you have used. And again, from experience, make sure that you outline that you're talking about the state of the art. You've seen reviewers getting confused because they thought we were already discussing the device data. If you outline it straight from the beginning, well, this is the state of the art, I'm going to use it to set the stage and make this risk-benefit profile of other methods, well, then you know where you are. Then the device description. The method has a full appendix telling you what to include in your device description. So it's online available, just take that. I didn't want to copy-paste it in here in full. But it includes the names, the models, the version numbers of your device, its indication, but also its contraindication, its intended performance, technical characteristics. It's all information that the evaluator needs to know anyways, because if its device is contraindicated for a certain purpose, and use for that indication would be off-label, and you don't necessarily have to include it in your clinical evaluation. It's interesting information though. If you have a clinical evaluation plan as a separate document, you have the device description in there as well. I would advise to copy paste it or to refer again to this clinical evaluation plan. Use the content of your device material that you provide to the user. So in your instructions for use or your surgical technique or on your website. But if you identify a discrepancy between your technical files, for example, and your IFU, do make sure that the rest of your team is aware of that as well. Because otherwise it will stay like that. Then equivalent devices, once again, be aware of the strict requirements with respect to equivalent devices. It's not the same as in the US. One device should be both clinical, technical, and biological equivalent. And make sure that if you use equivalent devices, that you outline what the differences are. So not only what's the same, and why do you think it's equivalent, but also what are the differences. For example, for technical equivalence, they don't ask you to have a device that is having exactly the same dimensions. They ask you to have similar technical characteristics. So maybe you can say, well, my device is, I don't know, 2.1 centimeters and the other one is 2.2. I know about the difference, but I don't expect it to have any impact on the safety or performance data that I collect because this and this and this. Same materials used in the same side of the body. And again, consult your notified body because they're using very different requirements at the moment, as long as the MDR is not fully implemented. And then your clinical evaluation. Well, these are these. Here, all those data comes together. Here, you provide the relevant preclinical data, your pre-market clinical data, your post-market clinical data, your device recalls, your CAPAs. You can all implement here. But do write towards those three essential requirements: the safety analysis, the performance analysis, and the risk analysis. And make sure as well that you don't only provide the data and just put it in there, but also evaluate this data, appraise the data, tell whether it's valuable or not, or which part you think are useful and which are not, or when it's used from a period that you had a different design of your device, but it's not really talking about the design, but more about biocompatibility. It might still be useful, but do outline it so the notified body doesn't have to guess that themselves. And in the conclusion, that should be a straightforward step if you have performed all your steps before. It brings all the items together. It has to refer to these three essential requirements. If you have multiple devices in your clinical evaluation, do outline here again whether you think the data is acceptable, whether there is not enough clinical evidence for all these devices, for all these indications that are part of your evaluation. Do outline whether you think the instructions for use were correct, whether indication is correct, but also whether you think, well, if you have found some safety aspects that are not included in the warnings or precautions and contraindications, that shall be outlined here as well. And then this is an important one, and that's circling back to the whole story on what the MDR expects and what all those other ISO requirements expect, the bigger picture that Christine pictured, outline whether there's a need for post-market clinical follow-up. Notified bodies nowadays do expect for new devices that you will have at least a post-market clinical follow-up plan available. They don't tell you that you have to say there that you're going to do a post-market clinical follow-up. Your plan might be that you're not going to perform one. I do think they expect you to perform a study, but they are not very clear on that. But again, if you don't do it, have a good justification. It's getting very hard to have your product on the market without these post-market studies. But do know that the post-market clinical follow-up study doesn't have to be a randomized controlled trial costing your thousands of euros. It can be a very simple study as well. It depends a bit on the risk of your device and the outcomes of your evaluation. Well, then the references and the appendices, make sure that you have all your literature referenced in your reference or your bibliography. That's a difficult word for me. And then your appendices, your clinical evaluation plan, your literature review protocol, your literature review report. Make sure you have a qualification and a declaration of interest for all the evaluators, because as I mentioned before, you have to justify your team of evaluators, but you also have to show that they don't have, well, whether or not they have interest in the outcomes of the report. And provide full text copies of all the literature that you use, as well for the state-of-the-art part, but also for the device part, or any sections in between where you use literature. The notified bodies are getting picky, so if you have a reference list and you have numbers for each copy, make sure that you have an appendix with the same number, because they don't like to search for this information. We actually had a non-conformity on that one. That's true, I was surprised myself. Are there any questions on this part?
You mentioned that we get an off-label article.
Yeah.
You don't include it.
Well, you have to search for clinical data for your indication, so you don't have to include it.
Right.
I myself think you should include it.
Right. Are you going to talk about? Would you talk about off-label use in the?
You don't have to.
You don't have to.
No. Oh. Because you only have to make sure that your device is safe and performs as intended according to your label. So if people are using it for something else, well, officially that's not your part of business. I do think it's your responsibility though, so I would include it. And I actually think that it gives you a lot of market opportunity as well, because if you see it being used a lot of label, you might want to change your
Because in the US, you would. If you get notified on that, you got a complaint because of off-label use, you have to report to the FDA.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, if you're aware of it and you don't do anything with it. Yeah. I don't think they will really like it if you don't do it. Good question.
I think that's a very complex topic about mental use, because I'm not sure in the details how it's going to work under the MDR, but in the U.S., if you expand your indications, you have to update your 510K. You know, so it's always, and that's a risk that you have to make, right? You want to take that opportunity to market that indication, great. There's a cost. You know, are you ready to meet the burden of that, and can you support it in your risk management documentation and in your clinical evaluation, and come out with that same conclusion of, you know, either safe and effective or safe and
Performance indicator. Yeah.
Does the MDR require CDR, class 1, self-declared type of products?
Yes, the MDR requires CRs for every device you have in the market. Yes. And we often have questioned whether it's a different kind of structure, or whether you have a different process, or whether it takes us less hours. You have to go through the same process. You just won't have much data, so it's very difficult to make a story of it. That's easier for your class 3 devices where you did perform one of your studies.
So do you rely on, like, advantages if you just rely on historical use or.
Yeah, sometimes we use the argument that not having any complaints and being still on the market after 40 years is kind of clinical data as well, because otherwise people wouldn't use it. So sales data is in that sense a clinical indicator as well. But yeah, it's a hard statement to make, of course. You had a question?
Yes, for along a similar line, for low-risk devices, because right now for our CE mark device, we have a justification not to have a PMCF, but could we have one that's also like just the post-market surveillance plan and that the PSER that's coming? Like, can it be like one strategy for all three?
And I'll look at Christine, is better to answer this question.
I mean, it depends. I think you have to address all the products, and you have to provide justification for why you're not doing particular plans or elements. And that comes, you know, in that post-market surveillance program, you know, there's different levels at which you can make different justifications. So you just have to give it support. So I think you're going to make that case. You're going to still have to refer back and talk about that when you did your CER, this is the information you obtained, you know, and you can therefore justify, you know, for example, long-standing use without significant complaints, or however it is you need to characterize it. Is that what you're asking?
Kind of, yeah.
Like everything depends, right?
Right.
Is your question as well whether you can put it in one document?
Yeah, like can our post-market clinical follow-up plan also be the post-market surveillance plan and also kind of feed into that new PSER requirement?
I mean, you can do it that way. I think now you're getting into sort of the art of designing a quality system.
Okay.
And, you know, there's people, hopefully, I don't know who the person at your company, but somebody should have an opinion on how modular you are, right? And so sometimes there's benefit in having distinct elements, because when you change something over here, you don't have to change everything. Or other times, especially when you're a small company, it makes sense to have a more nested series of processes, and you sort of blend nest them as you grow, if you will.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So I think it depends on the size of your organization, and how many products you have in the market, how long you've been in business, you know, all these things. I'd say for anything beyond a startup, nesting is not always a great approach. You end up regretting it for complicated reasons that reveal themselves.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? That's a lot of stuff. Does anyone know what time it is at the moment? Yeah. Okay, so we have some time. So we want to make a case study. It's not a very detailed case study, but we did want you to think a bit further on this topic. But I think we touched it already. So let's see where we go. So you have your medical device already on the market for like 20 years. And then you hear from marketing, well, we are aware of this off-label use and within the European Union, and yeah, what should we do with this? Is this a new market opportunity, and should we update the label? Where do we start? So I want you to think about, is at your company, is there a way that you would receive this information currently? Is there someone willing to share that with me? Because that's also interesting for me to hear. Is there a close collaboration between the departments, or is it really marketing as his own business and then person's writing the reports?
Just from the medical device background that I have as a rep in a hospital, typically we would be in a case, so to speak, and we would go to marketing, or we worked so closely with marketing at times we would say, hey, Dr. So-and-so or this hospital is using our catheter for this application. So then it would kind of go up the chain from there, and then get to the clinical department.
Okay, so that's good.
Right, right. But I think the close communication with the field, you know, us, the field reps, the trainers, is where a lot of this came from my experience in you know, the past.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any difference between off-label use or being handed a new product with new indication. The regulatory authorities don't regulate docs. Docs is off-label. So if you're a company and your sales group is recommending off-label use, it's just like they're giving you a new product.
Yeah, so you're not allowed to recommend off-label use, but sometimes you see it happening.
So if you want to make it official, then it's not becoming off-label use anymore, you have to go through all the.
Yeah, you go through all the
You're
process.
handed a new product.
Yeah, sure. And in this case, you have to write a new clinical equation as well for this different indication, maybe in a different report.
So just to circle this back to the CER topic, let's say that there's a really popular off-label use for a product, and it's actually being written about in the clinical literature. Okay, so it can come back, and when you're doing your search, you know, you can end up with hits that are from off-label use. And the question is, how do you characterize those, right? And what do you do about that? You know, you can take back to marketing and say, "Do you guys know about this?" They usually do, in my experience, whether they're sharing that or not. But then what do you do about it, right? And so that's the part that Anna's been sort of talking about. I mean, you come back and have a lot of hits on off-label use. How have you experienced handling that in your write-ups?
Yeah, well, we don't see it very often because the search is often very specific on the indication. Your search term are maybe specific for the indication plus the device, for example. But it is good to know in advance that there might be off-label use or whether there's a specific off-label use, so you can change your search terms accordingly. So you know more about it and you know whether you have to go through the regulatory pathway to get this indication clear. So, what's that? Okay. Any other topic you want to have some information on? We have some more time, otherwise we close this up. Yeah?
For equivalent devices, if, again, low-risk device, and a lot of the equivalent devices also don't have a lot of clinical data out there, I guess just keep using the low risk or the low complaint rate in the sales data, or just find an equivalent device that has clinical data, even if it's a little bit less equivalent than others.
I would advise, but again, you have to see what the people accept because I don't know exactly. But to not use the equivalent device because it's very hard to claim equivalence. You have a big chance that it will put a non-conformity on that because it's just not complete according to the NetF, or well, the NDR will be very hard anyways. And then even if you have it claimed, you still don't have the data that you were looking for. So then it maybe make more sense to not go for the equivalence and make a full story with the data you do have on your device. And maybe think about some easy way of getting some post-market clinical data. So you just mentioned you won't perform the post-market clinical follow-up, but you can think about having some QR code with the device that you're selling, if it's an over-the-counter product, that people can give their feedback. So you have a more active way of getting these complaints introduced, for example, or you have a health app designed specifically with a patient information letter, for example, to make it a bit more official, more formal, and then ask for data every 1 or 2 weeks with a pop-up and ask for data like that. So it's not a full study, and I think especially for these lower risk devices, this might be interesting to deep into.
Okay. And I just want to make a comment about the QR code topic, right? So this kind of is not that far off of a barcode, right? And barcoding is frequently, for many companies, part of their implementation of UDI. So, this is yet another moment where you're having an intersection of these two elements of the regulation, right? Where you can increase your reporting on your product through the use of these codes, and you're also, of course, meeting your compliance for UDI. Do you have any other questions before we wrap up? Was this, we do want to sort of ask in one, are you finished yet?
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because I have a wrap question here again.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you everyone for your time and interest. And if you do come up with any other questions, feel free to ask one of us during the conference these days.
Yeah, this is sort of an experiment to have two people from two different organizations do a presentation together. So we're curious also, was this effective to you to kind of have context overall and then get the details, and did that work well for you? Just say, yes, maybe some nods. Okay.
2 separate presentations. You have 2 separate presentations, each hour.
They couldn't ask from the one room to the other room with the same audience.
Bounce back and forth, that would have been better?
No, this is better.
Oh, this is better. Okay, good. Good. Okay, we tried, I tried to mention when Anne was going to be talking about certain things, and Interesting. Okay, thank you very much for coming.
So, one
So, methods with EU, is that are the EFTA countries and Switzerland and stuff like also going to adopt using how we do it in NDR? Is that-
Yes, yes. Even UK, who's working on the Brexit now, is thinking about using the same regulations. Yeah.
And thank God for that.
Okay, thank you.